In this video, I want to talk about Python lists. Let's open our empty file fun.py, and remember in the previous video we talked about variables and how useful they are, but there are situations that we want to use a different construct in Python called lists. Let me illustrate a point. Imagine I'm writing a program for somebody who is selling used cars. So this dealership has maybe, I don't know, 70 cars. So one way of doing this would be say, okay, car number one is a Subaru. Car number two is a BMW. Car number three is maybe Toyota. And you get the point. I'm not going to be listing cars like that in the code because that would be cumbersome. And instead, I can create a list of cars. So I'm going to use a one name for the variable, say cars. And the list in Python is basically a construct that uses the square brackets, and the elements of the list are placed in those square brackets and separated with comma. So for example, I could say the first car is Subaru. By the way, it's an order list, so everything is be displayed in order later. I'll show you. Subaru, the second car is BMW, the third car is Toyota. The next car could be Volkswagen. The next car could be, I don't know, Honda. And the next car could be Opel, and so on and so forth. Now we close the list of elements with basically with these square brackets. Now, if I want to display that list, the whole thing, I would say print cars. Let's run the code. So basically I don't need those 3 lines. So to run the code, let's go back to my second terminal, say python 3 funpy, and there you go. The important thing about lists is that the only limitation in Python is your computer's memory. So you could have a list with bazillion of different elements and use them. But how do we display them all maybe in turn? For that, we're going to use a concept related to Python loop. Instead of doing this, I'm going to create a first loop. Now, first let me show you what the loop is, and I'm going to start with for loop. For loop is basically a construct that iterates or moves between the elements number of times. In my case, there's a bunch of cars in the list, and I would like to display them one by one maybe. So I could say for element, an element of the list. In my case, element of the list is the car. So for element could be any word, could be basically C, or could be car. Let's go for car in, and this is where I place the name of my list. The name of the list is cars. It's in plural. Now this is a very important thing in Python, and you'll get used to it, but initially it kind of trips you up. When you use certain constructs in Python like for, while, or if, you finish that line with a colon, you hit enter, and you need to add the body of that loop. So this means that for every element, which in my case I called car, in the construct list cars, I want to now print each car separately in separate line. As you know, print adds new line character. Now to do that, we need to create a loop. So over which elements should we iterate? That needs to be indented. It could be 2 spaces, could be 4 spaces. Most people do 4 spaces, so I set up my editor. So when I hit tab, basically does 2 spaces, and tab again, 4 spaces. The reason I'm doing this is because sometimes I need only 2 spaces, sometimes I need 4. In case of Python, I use 4. So I just hit tab twice, but it's up to you. In your text editor, there's always an option to create a tab with 4 spaces. So what I do here is I say, so what do I do for each car in the list cars? I want to print what? This car. So what it says basically, for every element in the list, element is called car, the list is called cars, print that car. Now if I save the file and run the code again, let's clear the screen, it lists elements like that. What we have in the list here is number of elements that will be placed like this. I can also use list indexing. Now what's list indexing? Let me show you that here, that each list element is indexed inside the list. So that means it has a number referring to it, and we can use a number later. So for example, let me just remove that loop. If you look at this list, this element of the list, the first one, the Subaru, is an index of 0. So that's the first element in the list. That's a very important thing to remember, has index of 0. The second element of the list has index 1. The third is 2. Next one is 3. Next one is 4. And next one is 5. So that is very important to remember. Every element of the list has its index, the number indicating the order in that list, but those index numbers start with 0. Also, if you want to check what is the length of the list, so let's just say your code maybe has a list that we don't know how many elements we have, we can try to use the command len for length and specify the name of the list. So if I print that, let's save, it should tell me how many elements of the list there are. So let's go Python fun. Oh, sorry, it's the previous, I didn't say. So I didn't save the file here. Oh, no, now it's saved. So when I do that, I have 6 cars or 6 elements in the list cars, but they are numbered from 0 to 5. So let's just say if I wanted to see what is the car in index 0, that's going to be Subaru. How do we do that? We're going to place basically print cars, name of the list. We open and close square brackets, and we can also close the print. Inside the square brackets, we place the number of the, or element, index of the list element that we want to display. If I do this 0, let's clear the screen, save the file and run it, it'll display Subaru. Remember, Subaru is index 0. If I display, let's say, number 3 instead, so replace the 0 with 3, if I save my file, run it again, this time it's gonna display Volkswagen. What if I wanted to display the last element, but I don't know what is the last element number because I don't know the length of the list? So I can do this by checking the name of the length of the list first, len, and use that number. Or, so this is going to be 0, 0, starting at 0, so the number -1. Or we can also use the concept of -1. Let me show you. So if I do -1, save the file, run it, it displays the last element. So what I said before is true. The list elements are numbered like this: 0, 1, 2, 3, index 4 and index 5, 6 elements, but 5 numbers. But it also can be indexed in reverse order. So once we reach the end of the list, we can use this as a minus 1 element. So this would be something like minus 1. It's also the same as index 5. Minus 2, minus 3, minus 4, minus 5, and minus 6. So I just got a bit out of range here with those minuses, but you get the point. It is the same thing. So let's just say I want to display the third from the last. So that would be minus 3. Let's see if that works actually. So let's save it. I'm going to comment this out because otherwise it's going to show me an error while running the code. Right? And look what's going to happen when I run it. So minus 3 should be Volkswagen. Let's see if that's true. I save the file, run the code, and Volkswagen it is.